this special meeting that was requisitioned by the following members: Councillor Meiklejohn, Murtagh, Alexander, Bowes, Hughes, McHugh, Russell, Spears, Vinnie, Foley, and Deputy Provost and Ritchie. The agenda was issued last Monday, the 1st of November 2021. Hard copies of the agenda were delivered to all members on Tuesday the 2nd and Wednesday the 3rd of November 2021. This meeting is being held remotely and the public are excluded. This is the 14th time that Falkirk Council has met remotely. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. A video recording will be posted online shortly after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll now go to the agenda. First item, as I said, Mr. Moody, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Buchanan.
Present.
I think we know Deputy Provost Ritchie is having some difficulty getting on the call, so come to her later if she's joined the call. Councillor Aitchison.
Yeah.
Councillor Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Binney.
Present.
Councillor Bissett.
Present.
Councillor Black.
Present.
Councillor Blackwood.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Coleman.
Here.
Councillor Colley.
Present.
Councillor Coombs.
Here.
Councillor Flynn.
Here.
Councillor Garner.
Here.
Councillor Goldie. Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Present.
Councillor Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Kerr.
Present.
Councillor McHugh.
Present.
Councillor McCluckie.
Here.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Monroe. Is present.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
And Shaw.
Apologies have been submitted by Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patrick.
Present.
Councillor Russell.
Present.
And Councillor Spears.
Present.
That was Mr. Thomas.
Thank you for that, Mr. Moody. That takes us to item 2 in your agenda, which is declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time? None? None. Okay, thank you for that. That takes us to item 3, which is motions. There are 3 motions on the agenda. Motions A and B on the agenda are reserved to Council. Motion C, Falkirk families face financial crisis, stands referred to the Executive. Having consulted with the group leaders, I am of the view that this motion is best considered at the Executive. While I understand the importance of the issue raised, I also take into account the role of the Executive as a key policy decision-making body. So we're going to go straight away to item 3A, which is climate justice. It's pages 2 to 3.
Councillor Meiklejohn has her hand up.
I did have my hand up before you moved on to the item, just to say
Yeah.
that while it was in consultation with the group leaders, I wasn't in agreement that it should go to the Executive, and I just think that that should be recorded, because I felt it was a whole council issue and aligns with our poverty strategy, which is reserved to council.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll just go back just in case people maybe got lost the place there a wee bit in relation to where we are. But I've just had stated quite clearly that having consulted with the group leaders, and as Councillor Meiklejohn has stated, Councillor Meiklejohn was of the view that it should be reserved to the council. But having considered myself, I understand the importance of the issue raised, but also take into account the role of the Executive as a key policy decision-making body. So we'll go straight to the motion 3A, which is climate justice. It's pages 2 to 3.
Councillor Nimmo has his hand up now.
Yes,
Provost,
Councillor Nimmo.
can I just ask a quick question? You did say that group leaders were consulted. Can you just confirm when this actually took place?
Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll go back again. We're at item 3A, which is the first motion, which is climate justice, pages 2 to 3, and the motion is by Councillor Garner. Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Provost. Today's motion has come on the back of COP26 and the renewed emphasis on action, transparency and accountability. In 2019, Falkirk Council declared a climate emergency and recognised that in order to protect shareholders within our area, we had to do something quickly and we had to be bold, making difficult choices. Today's motion seeks to reaffirm our intentions, confirming our commitment to the statements that we made back in 2019. Given the magnitude of the challenge we face, we must all recognise that the time for contemplation has now passed and that we can no longer just make bold statements. We must now back them up with bold actions too. As such, I propose we firmly recognise and agree with the following motion. Bullet point 1, that climate change targets and obligations are clearly reflected in all council plans, priorities and consultation responses. Bullet point 2, that all reports which require decisions from elected members will include an assessment of impact on climate change targets and binding obligations within the first section of each paper, following the report recommendations. Falkirk Council has very clearly defined national and organisational targets which require the Council in all areas of service delivery to reduce its related carbon emissions. As elected members, we must ensure that these targets and obligations are reflected in any reports, projects, policies and strategies that we are required to make a decision upon. We must be vigilant in ensuring that where we see no evidence of these within documents presented to us, that we challenge the reason for their exclusion. In bullet point 3, that a climate change officer or other appropriate expert will be available for members to question during decision making. To ensure that we reflect the climate change targets and obligations within all areas of service delivery, it is appropriate that with all decisions we make, that we seek and receive advice from the appropriate officers regarding the implications of the decisions that we are due to take. This can be in the form of their inclusion at crucial meetings, but also via written reports outlining the potential implications of the choices where appropriate. And bullet point 4, that work on carbon budgeting be accepted in order to include, be accelerated, in order to include an assessment for each major decision in aforementioned report section. Significant work, as we know, is currently undergoing to define carbon budgeting and how it will align with intrinsic council policies and strategies, including the financial governance programmes within the council. It is crucial that this work continues at pace and is implemented alongside the next financial budget to ensure that going forward, we're able to account for and clearly project our anticipated carbon impact. Carbon budgeting will allow us to quantify how decisions and investments will help or hinder the council in meeting its statutory requirements regarding the reduction of carbon emissions. Bullet point 5, that a briefing of all members be organised to illustrate the impact decisions made since declaring the climate emergency have had on forecasts for reducing our carbon footprint and achieving net zero by 2030. The Energy and Climate Change team have undertaken the task of quantifying our current performance in reducing our emissions and how decisions taken within the last year will impact our ability to meet our statutory targets. It would be beneficial for all members to understand how such decisions may affect us, both financially and legally, in the context of the required action to meet climate change statutory obligations and what potential liability we are exposed to. In bullet point 6, the last one, that elected members make public their politically relevant climate change related pledges. For example, those made during assessment in their carbon literacy training, in order they are both transparent and accountable to citizens in Falkirk. Elected members recently undertook carbon literacy training, and I would like to congratulate all of those who successfully submitted and passed receiving a carbon literacy qualification. I would, however, suggest that in the interest of being transparent with their constituents and stakeholders, that for those who are able to submit a pledge, that we share our commitment and our pledges publicly with our stakeholders to show that we are serious and accountable for the decisions that we make going forward in our capacity as the decision makers for the council. I'm happy to move this motion, Provost.
Thank you, sir, for the content. I think everybody would agree that, it's on everybody's mind all over the world at the moment. It's such a serious issue. I'm going to Councillor Murtagh. I believe she's got her hand up. I don't know if she's going to second it. Councillor Murtagh. you're on mute.
Sorry, Provost, I'm having some problems with the lag on my computer. It mutes and unmutes and mutes and unmutes. I am indeed going to second it. Thank you, Provost. And obviously, I'm genuinely delighted to see this motion on the agenda today, and at this important moment for our world and our nation, as it looks to lead the way during COP26 on the issue of climate justice. We are debating what more we can do to play a meaningful part in tackling climate change. Despite some present mobility limitations myself, I was determined to get through to at least part of the march on Saturday. It was important not just to be with other like-minded people and play a part in putting pressure on the world's leaders, but also to listen and learn about the real emerging focus of this COP, which is climate justice and loss and damage. The focus on Indigenous populations and what they have already lost, never mind are set to lose, was at times very moving to hear about, and it's inspiring that Scotland is leading the way with the first dedicated global fund to compensate for loss and damage. It's a symbol that as those who have played a significant part in the damage already brought about by climate change, we must help others who have done little or nothing to contribute to this, but suffer the most. While we cannot unpick the part we have already played, it must be all of our collective goals to ensure that we do not continue to add to this injustice, either on populations far from home or on those in our society who have the least financial means to respond and are often at most risk. While world leaders gather in Glasgow to make global commitments, yet there is plenty we can do, plenty we must do in our own sphere of influence to ensure that we are playing our part. In the space between global multilateral action and personal responsibility, we cannot ignore our duty in the decisions we make in this Council, which are vastly more important than all of our personal goals put together. What this motion calls for is simple and perhaps could be summarised as an attempt to ensure that we do not fall foul of the curse of climate crisis, blah, blah, blah. The actions outlined in this motion are eminently sensible, practical and logical. If we have made a commitment to reduce our carbon emissions and get to net zero, then it stands to reason that we need to understand the impact of all our decisions have on these targets. We would not take budget decisions without financial advice or put ourselves further in deficit without a plan to combat it. So the same should hold for our carbon budget also. The elephant in the room for me, the catalyst in feeling that these changes are now particularly necessary other than COP, in fact essential, is that in decisions forced by opposition in recent full councils, that indeed leads to some of the other recommendations that have been outlined. The excellent and targeted climate literacy training recently offered taught us exactly where we as councillors could make a difference in terms of the spheres of influence we have. Buildings and transport were two massive parts of that, and yet 2 days after many of us made our pledges on what we could do in our decision-making role, we made unnecessary decisions to take us further away from our climate targets and increasing the number of buildings at the HQ site, reducing the possibility of their efficiency, and in failing to realise vital transformational change to our transport network. It's essential that we take stock and understand the impact these and other decisions have actually made and what we can do about them. I know, or perhaps I presume, that we all care about climate change, but I don't think I've ever felt so crushed or disappointed in any decision this Council has made than thinking how climate change concerns were given so little attention when it came to the biggest project we have ever been asked to decide on. To be honest, I felt a deep embarrassment on behalf of our cross-party group who went through climate literacy training together, but then whose opposition members paid little attention to that when they appeared so earnestly to commit to it. It's time to put measures in place that make our climate obligations impossible to ignore. Quite simply, it's time to reject greenwashing, time for a unified approach across this chamber on climate change that is actually reflected in decision making, and time for an absolute, unequivocal end to blah, blah, blah.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. Well summarised there, thank you. I'll go now to Councillor Bissett. Just ask if he's got an amendment to the proposed motion. Councillor Bissett.
Aye, thanks, Provost. I've got an amendment and I'll just read it out. It's fairly self-explanatory. Council agrees to continue this item to December Council meeting to allow a report to be prepared by officers on the practical and resource implications of each of the 6 proposed actions set out in the motion to allow a fully informed decision to be taken. Thank you, Provost. I formally move that amendment.
Okay, have you a seconder there, Councillor Bissett?
Yes, Councillor Coombs.
Can we hear from Councillor Coombs then?
Sorry, Provost, yes, happy to second.
Okay, thank you. An opportunity now to go to Councillor Kerr, leader of the Conservative group within Falkirk Council. Have you any further amendment, Councillor Kerr?
No, we have no further amendment, Provost.
Okay then, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded, we've got an amendment moved and seconded, and we're going to open up and debate. So whoever wants to just put your hand up and we'll get you in. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, colleagues. For me, one aspect of this motion is about measuring performance, introducing more robust approaches in relation to assessment, evaluation, and impact of the decisions made. It is, in essence, a managerial approach. In deciding on how to reduce our carbon footprint, Falkirk Council has a whole service approach, that where every service is expected to contribute to the efficiency of projects in order to reduce the carbon footprint. My understanding is that Falkirk Council produced 47,002 tonnes of carbon emissions during 2019-2020, a reduction on the year before. And it is important that elected members are briefed on progress on how the impact that projects have had on reducing our carbon footprint. Throughout the Falkirk Council area, we are experiencing the effect of climate change. For example, in my opinion, the issue of more flooding is coming to the fore. However, this motion is also about behavioural change. For example, in essence, calling for all elected members to work more collaboratively together. We as elected members have to be more bold, ambitious, and committed in our approach to climate change. For me, this means that elected members need to be more involved in strategic thinking, giving leadership through our respective political parties and engaging with our communities. The challenge for me is how to reduce the 47,002 tonnes of carbon emissions over the next few years, which will achieve our net zero target. I believe that we all as elected members can challenge our thinking and come together to create a united approach which will have an impact on our carbon footprint. I like to think that I am ready for the challenge. Can I ask, would you agree that you are ready for the challenge? Thank you, Provost.
Thank you for your input, Councillor Hughes. We'll get Councillor Monroe, then Councillor David Alexander. Councillor Monroe. Thank you. You're mute, Councillor Monroe. You're still mute. We still can't hear you, Councillor Monroe. Apologies.
Hello?
Okay. Thank you. We can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. Climate is very much in the forefront of all our minds. And I was surprised to hear one of the speakers talk about it being revolving around the decision made on the HQ Arts Centre, when after all the proposal before us was actually to knock down numerous buildings, which in itself has very major climate consequences, and as does new building itself. But I think I would have liked to have seen on this motion a list of the progress that we as a council have made. How many trees have we planted? How many cars have we relinquished? Are we keeping vehicles longer and purchasing fewer? Have we reduced the number of council properties dependent on fossil fuels? And how have we spent the 10 million capital budget allocated last year in pursuit of this goal? And of course, we've still not completed our Falkirk climate plan. So I think there are many more questions than answers, and we should be looking at why we haven't done these very basic things, or why we haven't included in this discussion a list of our progress, because to the outside world it makes it look as though we haven't done anything. Thank you.
19-1, Provost.
Thank you for that. Councillor David Alexander.
So
I had the 19-1 in there somewhere.
19-1, who's that from?
It's from myself, Provost, because
Yeah.
Councillor Munro referred to the member who spoke about the HQ building, and that is the point of the motion, is that if it was very clear within that report about what the climate consequences were. So the whole point of the motion is that we actually don't focus on one thing or another, but we actually make clear on every single point, every single decision we make, what the consequences are. That's the whole point of the motion, not to give ourselves a pat on the back about what we've done.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor David Alexander.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
it's a very, very strange amendment, particularly given that it wasn't so long ago that the Labour leader was saying that this aspect of policy and the crisis that we were in with the environment should form part of every agenda. And to still have it kicked in the long, or attempted kick in the long grass, delay one of the shortest moving of a motion, but a motion of this importance that I've heard. And so really, I'm disappointed with the leader's opposition's position on this and involvement. The fact is, Councillor Munro's point, it stands to reason that if you knock down old properties, and then you have the opportunity to rebuild with the much tighter green agenda attached. If in the town hall, municipal buildings, the west end of the Falkirk Town Centre are all relevant in that particular context. Therefore, the two mover and second were quite entitled to raise these points. Unfortunately, we're hearing much more. You do this. This is too difficult for us, and I can understand why. For example, in the last by-election, why the Labour vote was so poor. The fact is that most people are seeing Labour as being almost an irrelevance, and no one's really listening to you because of motions or amendments like this one. It's an amendment for no reason whatsoever, and that's something that has been noticed by the general public. Taking a while, but pennies dropped, pennies well and truly dropped. So let's hear a bit more constructive debate from the Labour members, particular. Just briefly on the issue of the achievements to date. Well, you'll have to look at the fact that the Falkirk Council's carbon total has decreased over the last few years as fast as we like it, and I've just explained perhaps one of the reasons why. The constant delays towards the construction of buildings which would be ecologically friendly, are most entirely down to the opposition members. The land, you'll have to look outside and see the cars, the fleet of cars from Falkirk Councils, and look at the change and the savings, both in terms of cash and also the savings in terms of the environment. When you look at Falkirk's fleet, so I think that let's be a wee bit more ambitious, lads and lassies. Let's see a wee bit more get and go rather than push it to the side. And I'm afraid you get and go, got and went.
Okay, thank you for your input, sir. Councillor Miko John was next, and if anybody wants to speak, get their hand up so we can catch it. Thank you.
Provost, I'm a 19-1, Provost.
19-1, Councillor Kerr, let's hear it.
And it's only for, so it can be noted, Councillor Alexander says disappointed in the two opposition leaders. I've not even opened my mouth yet, and he's disappointed in me.
Okay.
So,
I apologise.
Okay.
I apologise. You're quite right, Councillor Kerr. I was taking the lead from.
Okay.
I was taking the lead from your member.
Okay.
Who I assume is still a member of the Conservative group.
Thank you.
Okay. Apology accepted. Councillor Miko John.
Provost, it's continuing on the theme that Councillor Alexander was going on, that yet again we're seeing another kick in the long grass and inaction, yet we can hear the pontification of how important climate change is and it should be a #1 priority. And I quote that from Councillor Bissett at a recent meeting. Where we're not moving forward, and this is a continual example of where Falkirk District is being held back by the indecisions of this council, and that's not through the attempts of the administration in bringing things forward, but by the reticence of the opposition members to move forward and take some of these bold decisions that we really need to take for the future, not our future, but our children's future and our children's future in this case. And it's become so important. The whole principle of this climate justice motion means that we are committing to take action. We have an action plan that is currently in development. It will be brought in front of members over the coming months. And in that, we will be expected to take decisions based around climate change. And that's what this whole motion is committing us to do, is to be able to put that at the forefront of everything that we are doing. And I don't have confidence that this council will be able to do that, just because of the way that we have dealt with big challenging decisions over the last 4 years. But time's running out. Time's running out in so many ways for Falkirk District, but the time's running out for our planet. And if we don't get with the programme, then the finger will be pointed at us. And rest assured, Provost, my group, every one of my members will be pointing to those that are holding us back and making that progress. We have pontificated far too long. It's time for action. We need to relate climate change to everything we're doing. The town centre, the HQ, is a case in point. The report was clear about the climate change advantages in the proposal that was there, and we have not grasped that metal, and as a result we will pay dearly for that in many ways, but particularly with the alternative proposals that are coming forward, which does not reduce our built environment, and will not get rid of old inefficient buildings. So people have to actually decide whether this is a priority or not, and get behind it. And I would really urge all members to think seriously about just kicking this into long grass, make the commitment, let us get on and do the work, because the information will come back to members when you're asked to make decisions for the future, and just make sure that Falkirk is actually on the case about saving the planet. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. No other hands up. We'll go back to Councillor Gardner to wind up with his motion. Thank you, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Provost. And I don't know if I'm a fair bit scunnered or flummoxed at some of the things that's getting said here, but for Councillor Monroe, bullet point 5 in the motion, if she had read that, surely that would have given her what we're trying to do moving forward with this. And she's also part of the cross-claimant working group, which we're meeting again tomorrow to hear from officers where we are and what we're doing. So I find that quite concerning, actually, for Councillor Monroe. I won't take long to sum up because my colleagues have done very well talking about the motion and talking about the amendment as well, which I find the amendment is just, again, Councillor Bissett and the Labour group putting small financial increases, which we have already discussed with officers, because when we put a motion forward, we don't just do it at a whim. We actually look into it before we bring it forward. And what they're doing here, we're pushing this to another meeting, is just putting small financial increases ahead of protecting our planet and saving our planet. And that's what they're doing yet again. And you've heard the phrase mentioned, kicking it into the long grass. I don't know how many times Labour and Councillor Bissett have kicked things into long grass in relation to climate change. And it quite simply can't go on. I think if you look at the background for Councillor Balfour there, I think that sums up everything perfectly and shows you what problems we have and what we face in the near future and face now. So we have to move in this, and we have to move quickly, Provost, and this is what this motion is about. So yes, happy to move to the vote.
Mr. Moody. Mr. Moody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The motion is moved by Councillor Gardner, seconded by Councillor Murtagh, against which there is an amendment moved by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs, which has been circulated to all members. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Aitchison. We'll come back to Councillor Aitchison. Councillor Alexander.
That's the motion.
Councillor Balfour.
The motion and our planet.
Councillor Binney.
Motion, please.
Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Black.
Amendment.
Councillor Blackwood.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
The motion.
Councillor Colley.
The motion.
Councillor Coombs.
The amendment.
Councillor Flynn.
The amendment.
Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant.
Amendment.
Councillor Harris.
The amendment.
Councillor Hughes.
The motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
I'm for the motion and I'm appalled.
Councillor McCluckie.
Amendment.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
For the motion.
Councillor Monroe. Councillor Murtagh.
For the motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick. Sorry, Councillor Patrick. Councillor Patrick, I wasn't able to take your vote there. I wonder if you could just indicate again. Councillor Russell.
Motion.
Councillor Spears.
Motion.
And Councillor Aitchison, we weren't able to hear you earlier on. I wonder if you could indicate your vote now. Councillor Aitchison, we can neither hear nor see you. Councillor Aitchison, I'm not sure if your camera is switched off or not. Or you're on, I think, by telephone.
Not sure you can hear me. I'm having problems with, I don't know, can you hear me, Colin? If
I can
nod
hear
your
you now,
head?
yes. So
Yeah.
it's just a question, Councillor Aitchison, of motion or amendment.
I'll turn on the thing. I don't know if I've missed it or whatever.
No, we're still voting, so that's adequate. Thank you.
I withdraw that apology I made earlier on.
Obviously, there are 14 votes for the motion. There are 15 votes for the amendment. The amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. The amendment states quite clearly that that will come back to allow a report to come back at the next council meeting, which is on the 8th of December. Thank you, just to clarify. Okay then, that takes us now to item 3B on your agenda, and the motion is towards a diverse and inclusive council. It's pages 3 to 4, and the motion is being submitted by Councillor Murphy. Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Provost. I'm also having some technical difficulties today, so please accept my apology on that. Although after the last motion and in moving this motion, I have to confess that there is part of me that whispers that I should express a measure of gratitude to members in allowing me the opportunity to move it. But over the course of thinking what I was going to say today, I've concluded that this is probably the result of ridiculously deferential conditioning, so I'm not going to. We should be debating this, and I shouldn't feel privileged to be moving it. Because, in reality, action to acknowledge that diversity, inclusion and equality are actually important in the functioning representative democracy at local level is long overdue. These words, diversity, inclusion, equality, have generally positive and aspirational connotations to me, but uttered in certain spheres often come with huffing and puffing from those who see them nothing more as concepts pushed by the much derided snowflake generation, or indeed upstart feminist disruptors. Heaven forfend there should be any of us in those categories here. But the serious point is, do we or do we not believe that democracy is richer, that decisions are better, the more diverse and representative those sitting around that decision-making table actually are? If we do, then it's incumbent on us as those round that table to acknowledge the lack of diversity overall in local government and do what we can, limited though it may be, to try to combat it. It's often quoted that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, something which in recent discussions at Council I've begun to feel particularly acutely when it comes to some generational issues. Despite the fact that increasing diversity in local government is one of COSLA's key priorities, and this work is done on a cross-party basis to advance this, however, I sense that there are some members who may have wished this motion to go to executive, if at all. But given the further limitation on diversity that this would place in the debate, that only gives me further cause for concern. I concur completely with other members when they express their respect for Councillor Colley, for example, but I'm afraid that those words ring rather hollow if they're denying her the opportunity to take part in a full part in a motion on her portfolio that affects families of all ages across Falkirk. And this pattern, whether it concerns poverty, climate change, or a number of universally important topics to constituents, is yet another reason I've lodged this motion today, and as alluded to in the previous recent meetings in another, I make no apology for being angry about and bringing up the recent full council meetings. Indeed, I was again horrified by the expression of deference towards our forefathers having made wise decisions decades before I was even born, and I am by no means a young person, as an apparent factor in decision making. To be blunt, it's of no relevance whatsoever to our current decision making what our forefathers thought. I don't know that there were any foremothers either, which pretty much illustrates its own point, but the same holds true. This is arguably the most important decision that our council faced in many years, but it was made without the voices of generations it would affect most being considered front and centre by those proposing it. I could quote all the various national statistics, but we don't need a complicated or detailed survey to see where the disproportion lies in this chamber. And that's despite the absolutely wonderful election of my new colleague, Councillor Russell, who I'm delighted is going to be following me in this debate. Respected and valued though we have 4 times as many of some names and twice as many of others as we do elected members under 40. We have had budgets where less than a fifth of members voting successfully for the entire spend of the council were women. The entire cohort of women on the opposition benches would only be enough to fill the elected membership of one of our smallest wards. It's not that all women, men, young, disabled or BAME people have the same priorities and views as each other. Of course not. Nor that any demographic has superiority or greater right to be represented. Quite the opposite. It's the lack of balance, the lack of diversity, which is the issue, and the effect it has on our democracy and the decisions which we make. What this motion calls for is an acknowledgement that this is an issue and to take action to do what is within our power to try to mitigate it. So I'd like to just outline a few of those measures briefly. Firstly, that we all suffer from unconscious bias, myself included, and that without an awareness of this, our decisions are likely to be affected by a variety of different forms of bias. I know that Councillor Russell intends to pick up on these, so I won't go further down that track. So further training as a standard is essential, but so too are other parts of this motion, such as enhancing the role of EPIAs and addressing the tone of debate and discourse, which I believe make this a less attractive atmosphere for underrepresented groups, as many have actually told me this, as well as just being downright rude at times. And yes, I make no apology for saying sometimes sexist and misogynistic in tone too. Examples can be provided, but in the interest of brevity and other things, I'm guessing most would rather I didn't. Though if anyone is minded to 19-1 please try not to address me as a young lady in your opening remarks. Whether it's this or being asked a whole bunch of other things, the root is the same thing, a lack of respect, a demarcation of being different in value to others, and when that is highlighted, especially in public, it's clear that we're not held in equal esteem to others. So there are parts of this motion designed to address that issue, to highlight that whether from elected member to elected member, or indeed with officers and staff, standards have not always been what they should be, and this presents a much less welcoming and conducive environment to others who are greatly needed to increase diversity in this chamber and others across the country. Finally, if you can't see it, you can't be it. Something always brought home to me walking past the portraits of our entire history of male provosts on the way into council, much loved though they are. I'm pleased that our SNP group here has a rare female majority with recent results, but it isn't enough though, because as Professor Mary Beard observes in her book Women in Power, the institutions we're elected to expect us to instantly change and conform to fit systems designed by men for men, and if we don't, it's us who are not fit for the job. We have opportunity with more flexible arrangements made possible by new technology to consider more fully the needs of others, be they in a variety of caring roles with children, those with disabilities and those with a wider array of less secure professions, which will also help the younger demographic in particular. That isn't to say that the needs of those who may need support within a physical meeting environment are any less important, and I acknowledge and respect that. But minority groups are minority groups for a reason, and the needs of the majority shouldn't be the thing which disenfranchises them. Again, it's all about balance. Balance, respect, and a commitment to acknowledge the problems we have with achieving diversity, and that while we are the poorer for it, we are determined to do what we can to support the work of others externally in doing so also. If making a commitment to inclusivity and better, more flexible arrangements makes it more possible for even a handful more BAME, young people, women, or those with disabilities to have the reassurance to see themselves as a councillor, then we should do it and we should shout about it. There is little doubt in my mind that enabling change within the council is long overdue on this topic, but the recent decisions and the coming election make this more acute than ever. I'd ask the whole virtual chamber for their support, therefore, not only with the motion, but in a commitment to embody the spirit of it, to improve the quality of democratic debate and decision making for the good of Falkirk citizens. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. You summarised your motion absolutely wonderful there. I believe that it's Councillor Russell's going to come in and second you. Councillor Russell, is it?
Yes, thank you. I'm delighted to second a motion which clearly identifies the need to ensure that council representation is a true reflection of the society we live in. The motion makes it clear that training and development is key to ensuring a true understanding of unconscious bias, diversity, inclusion is delivered to individuals within the workplace. However, it's important to remember that as individuals have personal responsibility for their behaviours that they display and their own self-learning when dealing with elected members, officers, members of staff, public, to ensure that they feel confident that their skills, knowledge and understanding is treasured and valued, and they can enter a public forum or any workplace with secure that their thoughts and understanding life skills are represented in all walks of life. I think it's important that we work together to ensure that a stronger society, that inclusion and diversity is key and at the heart of all that we do. The motion itself also makes note towards a young person's champion. And at the moment, the Scottish Youth Parliament elections are ongoing, which is an exciting juncture for 12 to 25-year-olds to have a vote to see who should be representing them in a public forum. It takes place, and I think we all want to wish them well. This is a strong motion which outlines that accessibility should not be given mere lip service, but should be in the heart of all planning and development as workplaces become fair, equal and open opportunities for all. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution there. That was your first contribution at a full council, and it was very, very well summarised. Okay, then we'll have a motion moved and seconded. We'll go to the leader of the Labour group, Councillor Bissett, to see if he has any amendment to the motion.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Provost. I do have a fairly short amendment, and we do already have the standards for councillors. We get the handbook at the beginning of our term, a lot of detail on that, and any of this can be referred to the Standards Commission. And within the Labour Party itself, we do have a diversity and inclusive policy. We would try to welcome everybody. So I'll just read out our amendment. Council agrees to continue this item to the December Council meeting and asks that the Director of Corporate and Housing Services brings forward a report identifying areas in the motion that may already be in the Council's existing policies on diversity and inclusion, and bring forward any recommendations for inclusion in the policy. Provost, I formally move that. It's mainly an operational matter, this, so in part. So I think it's important that we get a full report on it. Thank you, Provost.
Have you got a seconder, Councillor Bissett?
Yes, Councillor
Happy to second, Provost.
Fine. Okay then. Councillor, I think Councillor Colley had her hand up to come in here in the debate. But before I bring you in, we'll just go to Councillor Kerr, leader of the Conservative group, if he's got any further amendment at this time. Councillor Kerr?
No, Provost, we haven't got an amendment. No.
Okay, thank you. I'll go back then. We'll open it up for debate. Councillor Colley, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see this motion come forward. I'm a little disappointed that we're again kicking it into the long grass. I think that this motion, actually, the information would be coming forward anyway. Scotland doesn't have diverse councils. When people look in, they don't see themselves reflected. That's not a criticism of the job that current councillors do, but rather an acceptance that there's work to do to make our councils more diverse. And when someone is elected, more welcoming and flexible to their needs. Scotland's record on representation of LGBT people is quite strong. A survey by LGIU found that around 5.8% of councillors identified as lesbian or gay. This is relatively good representation. However, other areas of diversity are pretty poor. According to the EHRC, less than 1% of representatives are from an ethnic minority background. This is considerably less than those from a minority ethnic community in Falkirk District, which as a whole is 4.2%. To build on Councillor Murtaugh's analogy, there are more Lauras in Falkirk Council than there are BME councillors. In terms of representation by gender, the Scottish population is some 51% female, yet across Scotland, just 29% of councillors are female. The average age is 53 years, according to LGIU. 32% are in their 50s compared to just 18% in the population as a whole. Younger age groups are very underrepresented and I'm talking about under 30s here, with just 6% of councillors falling into this age bracket compared to 17% of the Scottish population. Moving on to the issue of unconscious bias. I did a bit of reading up on this because I accept that I don't know as much as I should do. I looked at some of the research and it indicates that our brains naturally use bias to subconsciously pursue our goals. It's inherent to our social cognition skills that unconscious biases are in the mind's way of automatically making associations between two concepts. Looked at this way, they're helpful mental shortcuts, allowing us to process information faster. It's for this reason we instinctively place people into categories using criteria such as skin colour, weight, age, gender, accent, education, sexuality or status. This categorisation saves our brains time and effort of absorbing and processing information, letting us use our mental resources elsewhere. Sadly, the same process can also affect our behaviour in undesirable ways, preventing us acting in our own best interests or those of a group. Categorising people can lead us to make untrue assumptions about them, which makes us treat them differently. At best, it can cause strained relationship, at worst, injustices. And I was looking at some of the examples, and it's actually fascinating. If you look at two CVs, one for John and one for Jennifer, the managers, both men and women, overwhelmingly decided to offer the job to John. They were happy paying him a higher starting salary and were more likely to mentor him. This is despite Jennifer's CV being identical. Similar research showed that the same was true for names. In this instance, African American Asian applicants who masked their name were more likely to get interviews than those who did not. Class and status are also affected. Research by the Social Mobility Commission showed that you're more likely to get offered a job as a man if you're wearing black shoes over brown shoes at an interview. Absolutely, that's because black shoes have a historical association with professional roles and a higher social class. Most of us would never hold this conscious belief, but somehow it still impacts our decision making. We first of all have to accept that we all have these unconscious biases and accept that we're not as diverse a council as we could be. We can accept this all and we can accept that we have much to learn. When I think about it, I understand things much better that link to my own experience. So I'm able to think about some of the barriers that women, LGBT people and disabled people face more than, for example, I understand the experiences of Black and minority ethnic people and their barriers. And I'm certainly not under 30 anymore, more the pity, and so have less understanding of the perspectives of younger people. I may have biases that I'm not even aware of. Even in areas that I have more experience and understanding, and also know that I still have much to learn. My experience of some of the hearing loss and physical problems is very different to someone with a sight loss or who struggles with accessibility because they're in a wheelchair. I understand the barriers that unpaid carers face caring for a family member, but as someone without children, I've got less of an understanding for the barriers of parents, particularly women face in trying to juggle childcare with being an elected member. I support all of the suggestions in the motion and we just want to mention a couple. I really like the idea of a young person's champion. We've seen the huge benefit of the Champions Board, young care experienced people leading, having their voices heard and directly influencing decision making of the council. We've all benefited from it. A younger person's champion working directly with young people and bringing their views to our debates and discussions would be highly beneficial, I believe. Emma mentioned the Scottish Youth Parliament, and I would note that the recently delivered free bus transport for young people came directly from the work of that Youth Parliament. This is young people saying what was important to them and that being delivered. We could think about extending that further to other groups too. I also think we need to use our EPIAs much more in decision making. They should inform everything we do, ensuring that we don't unconsciously make decisions that cause detriment to those with protected characteristics, for example. We heard yesterday at the Education, Children and Young People's Committee about a new children's right tool to assess the impact of decisions on children's rights. And I'm glad this will come forward to help us in our decision making too. I think the point is, just to finish, I think the point is no matter where we're coming from, we can all learn and we can find ways to make local councils and this council in Falkirk a more welcoming and inclusive space.
Okay, thank you very much for your input. We now have Councillor Munro, followed by Councillor Binney. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Provost. I really like this topic because diversity or lack of it informs many important milestones in human evolution. It's not about age or race or cultural background. It's about history, business, education, and also about politics. There's a strange irony that a political group which is only listening to similar ideas to their own should raise this topic, because a real study of the importance of diversity would demonstrate how important it is to understand our differences in the pursuit of change. We need to be open to new ideas rather than shaking our heads when a differing point of view is made. The SNP is, as the experts say, an echo chamber where everyone espouses the same narrow view and votes accordingly. This is a huge topic, not something in which we mix up the desire to promote equality rather than understand that diversity only exists when we are open to and share ideas from other groups and cultures. That lack of diversity is rife in large corporations where a particular mindset takes hold. And it's a lesson for local authorities and other public sector organisations too. And before we implement any narrow SNP-inspired programme to implement a groupthink mindset, I encourage everyone to read Matthew Said's book, Rebel Ideas. He writes for the Times and is Welsh and Pakistani in his roots, and also the work of Joseph Heinrich, Professor of Human Evolutionary Biology at Harvard, and the work of Scott Page, Professor of Complex Systems, Political Science and Economics at the University of Michigan. If we're going to encourage true diversity, let's first arm ourselves with the knowledge and understanding of why it's such an important topic. The SNP is ironically the exact opposite of what a diverse organisation represents, which is being open to shared ideas. Many of the suggestions being put forward today are already enshrined in the current Equalities Act. And as Matthew Said says, success is no longer just about talent or knowledge or skill. Today, it's also about freeing ourselves from the blinkers and blind spots that beset us all and harnessing a new critical ingredient, which is cognitive diversity. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, Councillor. We'll now go to Councillor Binney. Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Provost. What I would like to say is, first of all, I want to say thank you to all the previous speakers. All of us want to make a difference, that I'm sure, or we would not be councillors. Even though we have political differences at times, we all have our people and our communities at heart, regardless of who we are. So I really want to really talk on one theme in particular, and that is understanding unconscious bias, because I believe that is a key to a diverse and inclusive council. So you might ask, what is unconscious bias? Unconscious bias refers to a bias that we are aware of. Implicit or unconscious bias happens by our brains making incredibly quick judgments and assessments of people and situations without us realising. They can occur when we make fast judgments, are tired, or under pressure. Often they may be incompatible really with our conscious values and considered actions. Nearly every one of us in society and in the workplace, some more and some to a lesser degree, have unconscious bias. That's me too. So that is why I feel it's vitally important that all members should maybe undertake this training, not only for themselves, but to enable greater understanding of people, situations, and in turn, we could make more inclusive decisions. Some examples of unconscious bias, and it's really important we understand it, though we will have training and go into it deeper to understand it fully, is assuming that an older person walking with a young child is the child's grandparent, thinking a person near state retirement age should retire, belief that men will not have caregiving responsibilities, assuming that a person with a disability will take more time off their work than a person without a disability, associating good bad work ethic with some ethnic groups, assuming somebody without a degree is not clever. The list is endless. I must admit it helped lessening my unconscious bias when I lived in a small country in Southeast Asia. All religions and nationalities live there, and you know, they were the most welcoming people I'd ever met. They took me into their homes, invited me to their events, and there I learned we were all human, and that everyone, regardless of social status and the protected characteristics we know, should be respected and valued. And I really want to say, even the media can have some bias. There was some bad press about this country a few years back. I did not recognise that from the experiences I experienced there. And I met hundreds of people from all cultures and all walks of life. So even the media too plays a part in unconscious bias. And I believe Falkirk Council, its employees and us as members, even though we think we know a lot and we understand a lot, and our communities, I think we will be a better place learning more about diversity, inclusion and unconscious bias. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input, Councillor Binney. Councillor Meikle-John, I believe, get a hand up next. Thank you.
Provost, yeah, there's a theme here, and it's becoming more and more focused over the last 4 years and right down to where we are now. There's clearly a lack of ambition by our opposition within this council. I don't actually believe they want a diverse council, and by just punching it back to their own party's policies doesn't actually help Falkirk Council in any way. It's the structures and the systems that we have within the council that need to change in order to be far more attractive to a wider audience within our communities and to actually put themselves forward for elected office. And that's the bottom line. Now, again, it's one of those things, we hear the rhetoric of all the parties around this, but nobody actually wants to do anything. This is about doing something and doing something positive to make our processes more open, more attractive, and allow that diversity to come in. I'm old enough to have been through the political system, and I have seen how the political system has changed with more women coming into politics. And that is a positive, and that is nothing against any of my male colleagues, because vast majority that I have worked with have welcomed that and have understood that there are skills from both sides. But we need to be more diverse in order to be reflective of our communities, and that, again, that's what this is about. Kicking it in the long grass yet again means there's a lack of commitment there, and some of the hypocrisy that I've been hearing today. Folks really need to go away and reflect and look at their own parties, look at their own groups, because certainly I take issue with comments that were made by Councillor Munro around the SNP being one of the least diverse. Firstly, by gender we are far more diverse, but by views we are more diverse. However, we work together collectively to bring forward a collective view, and that's what we present. And I'm not sure that that's the case for other parties. But certainly, it shows that there's a real lack of ambition. We don't want, obviously, Falkirk Council to move forward. That's hugely frustrating as an administration for us to have that constant noose round our neck, because that's what it's becoming. as we continually get pushback, vote after vote rejected, and some of the big decisions, as we've already said, getting kicked into the long grass that will cost us dearly in the future. This is another situation where we have the ability to make a change for the future, modernise our council, and we are going to be held back by not doing that. I'm really disappointed in the opposition just wanting to kick this again into the long grass. I have no doubt it'll come back with the report. They'll tinker about, make a couple of changes, and it'll be pretty much business as usual. We need to move on from that. I sincerely hope that other external factors will allow those to maybe open their minds a bit more, or maybe think about their future. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you for your input. As there are no other hands, we'll go straight back to Councillor Murtagh to wind up.
Yeah, I mean, as the leader was just saying, I mean, I'm incredibly disappointed at the theme of this whole council this morning. You know, and it does make my heart sink, because one of the things that, like, I think it was Councillor Bissett, I apologise if I'm wrong, said that, you know, we've got standards, we've got the Standards Commission, we get a document at the beginning. Well, that's just not good enough. You know, if that's not being exercised, it's like saying, you know, we also have the law, and the law is quite often broken, but if the onus is on the person who is at the behest of the discrimination or you know, the lack of diversity, to take it forward, to challenge every time, to put their head on the block, you know, when that happens. And a case in point, in this council, I was apologised to in private, and when I mentioned this in public, to accept it graciously, was challenged as to my disgraceful behaviour for having brought that topic up. That's unacceptable. If the Standards Commission is the best we can hope for, you know, it's like saying, well, we can do whatever we want during council, and as long as we're not taking to standards, that's okay. Well, that's not good enough, and that is exactly the wrong message to be sending to the general public. If they are tuning in and seeing some of the discourse that's happening, if they're seeing the discrimination or the language that's used at times, and it has been wrong, then that doesn't make it a welcoming environment to them, and it shouldn't be up to the person at the receiving end to challenge that through a difficult process. That's unacceptable. This, again, like the last motion, is not about any of us and not our parties giving ourselves a pat on the back for what we do. I am incredibly proud of our group. I think we can look round and see the diversity, not just within the female male balance, but in other ways as well. But we all know we've got further to go. It's an acknowledgement that it's the lack of balance and diversity that's the issue, not in the character or the calibre of who we have round the table. But we have to reflect on that. And I know that my party is working really, really hard, and I'm really proud of the motions that have been put forward and the policies that have been put forward, and how the Scottish Government is committed to tackling this. Of course I am. But that's not the point. I'm also proud, contrary to what Councillor Munro has said, and I mentioned in my remarks, the cross-party work led by Alison Evison at COSLA and the group there. I'm as likely to retweet and agree with Alison Evison on what she's doing on that than I am with our own members. And again, Caroline Noakes down at Westminster and the works that she's doing on our Equalities Commission, these are things that should unite us. What I question is, what is it in the amendment? What is it in the motion that the movers of the amendment can't agree to? What is it that they actually take issue to? Because in common with the last motion, I personally I can't understand, and an unconscious bias, since Councillor Munro mentioned the book, I'll mention as a French person, as somebody with dual nationality, I've had remarks about how I look, what I wear at council, and it always reminds me of the book Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, which we all read growing up, and it's a book for adults too, where the Turkish astronomer who discovers the planet of the Little Prince gives his discovery in an international conference in Turkish dress, and is laughed at and is ridiculed because he doesn't look like everybody else there. But the next year comes back in the suit, gives it, and is lauded about this. And we've all sat, I think, round the table and round tables in national meetings and said, I've made a point, being passed over 20 minutes later, whether it's a man or some, you know, generally an older male in this case, makes exactly the same point and is rewarded with it. That's an excellent point. And I just finished, Provost, that the cartoon that springs to mind is when you're in a meeting and the woman makes the point and the convener says, "Why, that's an excellent point, Mary. Why don't you get one of your male colleagues to suggest it?" It kind of sums it up for me. So I don't understand what it is that's so offensive or wrong in the motion that's proposed. And I think, as Councillor Meikle-Jones says, it's kicking it into the long grass in the extreme, and is just disgraceful, and a lack of ambition, a lack of vision. I can't believe that we're rejecting both climate change measures and equality and diversity in this council. It's an absolute travesty.
Okay, and thank you very much for your input this morning, Councillor Murtagh. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Provost. The motion is moved by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by Councillor Russell, against which there's an amendment moved by Councillor Bissett and seconded by Councillor Coombs, which has been circulated to all members. Provost Buchanan.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost Ritchie.
Motion.
Councillor Aitches.
Amendment.
Councillor Alexander.
Motion.
Councillor Balfour.
The motion.
Councillor Binney.
Motion.
Councillor Bissett.
Amendment.
Councillor Black.
Amendment.
Councillor Blackwood.
Amendment.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Councillor Coleman.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Coombs.
Amendment.
Councillor Flynn.
Amendment.
Councillor Garner.
The motion.
Councillor Goldie.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant.
Amendment.
Councillor Harris.
For the amendment.
Councillor Hughes.
Motion.
Councillor Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor McHugh.
Motion.
Councillor McCluckie.
Amendment.
Councillor Meikle-John.
The motion.
Councillor Monroe.
Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Murtagh.
The motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Patrick.
Amendment.
Councillor Russell.
The motion.
And Councillor Spears.
The motion.
Provost, there are 14 votes for the motion. There are 15 votes for the amendment. The amendment is carried.
Okay, that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Just like to thank every one of you for your input, and we'll look forward to seeing you. I think it's the 8th. Is that the next full council meeting, when we'll have discussions on the issues again once the reports are finalised. Other than that, keep safe, you and your families, and a good day. Thank you.